afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today with the next section in the DEWESoft Academy USA seminar series, today focusing on frequently asked questions and some Q&A time. My name is Corey Schwanz, and this is Robert Levanti. We work in support here at DEWESoft USA. Today's webinar is going to be a little less structured necessarily than the one that we had last week, led by Dave Gallup. He had a nice presentation kind of going forward and actually going through some history of the actual strain gauges and the best ways to implement them in DEWESoft and kind of what to get what you're looking for. This presentation is going to be a bit more freeform, let's say. I've got a couple slides here, necessarily kind of going over just a lot of the some frequently asked questions that we receive just in support fairly often, and be easy enough to actually put together in a presentation like this. But we really wanted to, the main focus of this is going to be actually getting feedback from you and finding out information that you want to know. So got a couple slides here just more as a kind of an icebreaker, and maybe while other people continue to log on after this. But maybe if you could start thinking of either questions that you may want to have and talk about later. We'll be having a bunch of dedicated time specifically for those kinds of questions. If you put them, go ahead and put them in the chat. We can actually get them up together. We'll be able to read what you have submitted, and then either me, Robert, or we actually have John Miller, Dave Gallup, and Matt Inquist from the last session on as well. When between us, we'll be able to just kind of answer some of the questions that you have and be more of a collaborative experience than more of a presentation. So yeah, we'll have some dedicated time just for that at the end of this. So if you have any questions that pop up throughout the actual presentation as well, please absolutely let them know. We are more than willing to take a break or stop, and we can go on any sidebar or tangents that we're looking for if that's what you're looking into, or if that's what you're into. So we're more than willing to do that kind of thing. And I think otherwise we are ready to go. As we said, we are Corey and Robert. We're the ones who really go through a lot of the questions that are submitted online. So if you ever have any questions, then you submit them to support.us@dewesoft.com. Or if you send an email on the DEWESoft website to the Contact Us form, we're the ones who receive those questions that you get on the actual website itself. So by sending those kinds of things in, we're the ones who see them, and we kind of go through and let's say triage and see what kind of questions come in. And get as much help as we can. We try to answer them, and everything is as much as possible as we can here in the United States. Between us and the application support team, John, Dave, and Matt. And then if we need any types of software modifications or bugs or feature requests or things like that, we send those on to the team in Slovenia after we kind of go through here. So we make sure that everything's kind of gone through here in the US first. So one of the other common questions that we get online fairly often. Right now, one of the first things we wanted to bring up were some sensor hookups and wiring diagrams are fairly common that we see coming in a lot. Right now, I actually have two different wiring diagrams for some common DC MEMS triaxial accelerometers on the market, one by Dytran and one by SDI. You would actually use these diagrams to hook up and connect to something like a series STG, STGM, or HG STGS amplifier. A DEWE 43, or let's say a Krypton STG 3 times, 6 times, or even a 1 times would be very similar to this, but those have, the 43 has one additional pin that is different for how excitation works, but these are going to be very similar after this. So specifically, so this is going to be for a Dytran 7533AX, particularly for a model number. Here's how you would hook up something like this. So with the actual Dytran sensor itself, it looks like it has 6 cables actually coming out of it, color coded as yellow, black, red, blue, white, and green. So to hook up this triaxial accelerometer, what you need to do is actually have 3 dedicated channels on your DEWESoft hardware. In this case, like I said, we're using a series. So the x-axis, the y-axis, and the z-axis are all going to have their own dedicated channel. And then you can manipulate or interpret those as each individual direction after that in the software. So for this particular device, the red wire you can see is particularly for excitation, but we don't need excitation from all 3 channels. So what you can do is actually hook up the red wire just to one excitation line on one channel, and then since the DEWESoft devices have programmable excitation, you can set that to whatever you're looking for particular device. I think it ranges from around 2 to 15 depending on your device. Necessarily what you have. Sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less, necessarily what your particular amplifier is looking for. But you only need to power it off of one particular excitation channel. And then you can see I have the yellow is the y-axis signal, blue is the z-axis signal, and green is the x-axis signal. And those are all positive signals. So that means I actually have them wired to each individual series channel into the in plus port on each of those channels. On the DEWESoft systems, all of our D-sub-9 connectors, pin 2 is going to, you can actually see that in minus is going to be 7, so pins 2 and 7. For this particular device, we're only actually using the positive. We don't need to use the input negative signal. I think on the actual, something like a sensor, it may actually show up as output. So if you see something like on your sensor, it actually says output signal. On the DEWESoft side, you would actually read that as input, because going out from the sensor into DEWESoft. So that's how I kind of correlate which wire would go to which port on the actual system itself. We also have the ground. Black is the ground. I actually like assigning every single ground in each of the 3 channels that you see. So it's one wire coming out from the actual sensor itself, but I have that jump to 3 individual wires as well. That's a great way to just make sure that circuit is complete and you get a full signal going through for your actual device. And this is for, like I said, the ditrans sensor. So now for something a little bit more involved is the SDI sensor that we have. They're actually using significantly more cables. So we have red, black, green, white, brown, orange, blue, and yellow. So as opposed to the last one, you can see it actually says x-axis positive output and x-axis negative output. So on this particular device, for example, it actually does use both positive and negative leads that you would want to use on the actual DEWESoft device itself. So similarly as before, power is only going to be going from one actual channel. Power, we don't need to worry about getting power from all 3 channels since it's only one sensor. So we hooked it up to the very first, or it could be the second or the third. You just need one dedicated channel specifically for power like that. Then you can set the excitation levels as you need in DEWESoft. But here we actually have pairs of wires going to each DEWESoft channel. So x-axis positive and x-axis negative, that's going to be the green, and it says white, but I actually made it gray just so you can see it on this particular screen. Green and gray are going to input plus and input minus on channel 1. And then we have brown and orange going to input plus and input minus on channel 2. And then the blue and the yellow going to input plus and input minus on channel 3. So different types of devices. Once you see a lot of these coming in more frequently, you can start looking for patterns and necessarily what types of sensors. They may not use the same terminology or exactly the same nomenclature per actual channel or how that sensor's hookups are made. But here we're looking for how you would hook up something like a MEMS triaxial accelerometer and how you can then translate between all different types of manufacturers' terminology into DEWESoft. So yeah, these are just 2 of the common ones that we see with DEWESoft. Does anyone have any other types of sensors that they are interested in hooking up and they want maybe some clarification on or anything else? Like for example, last week we were talking about strain gauges a lot. We also have other types of tachometers, counter sensors that would go into the super counter ports on maybe something like a Dewey 43 or a Sirius STG plus, STGM plus, LV plus. Usually that plus denotes counter specifically. So does anyone else maybe have some other types of sensors that they have a question of? Maybe they'd be interested in asking how you would hook something like that up. We'll see what information comes in the chat here. Okay. Nothing showing up yet. But if you have any additional questions, like I said, we will be having some dedicated time specifically for this. Maybe we need start opening up microphones as well. So depending on what kind of questions you have, you might be able to ask them like that. But yeah, definitely just keep thinking about what you have. So another question that we really get often is, let's say you've got some brand new DEWESoft equipment and you're looking to plug them in. You have some Dewey 43s, you have some Sirius units, you have some Krypton thermocouples, for example. The Sirius and the 43 plug in great, those are going through USB, but you then plug in the Krypton and then it's not showing up in DEWESoft. I know that it's powered on because I have some green lights turning on, but I'm not actually getting any kind of communication from the computer itself. That's something that we see very frequently, especially if it's the first time you actually bought one of these EtherCAT-based devices. So there are a handful of steps that we recommend going through to get those up and running. So Robert, I think, will actually go through some of those. And these are the things that we really like to ask before we look into actually seeing if the hardware is, let's say, defective itself for whatever reason, or any kind of communication issues. These are the 99% of the time, these kinds of steps are what we go through to get something like an EtherCAT device up and running. So Robert.
All right, thank you, Corey. So yeah, when you plug in a Krypton, you usually got two ports on there. You got the in and the out. You got power and communication. Communication is usually 8-pin to RJ45 going into the computer. We'll just take it one very basic setup. Then you got 8-pin power going to power. If you're getting power on the L light, you get an L, D, and an L light. If you got a power on the L light, you got obviously power coming into the unit. D is for data communication, and then the L is for power passing to the next unit. Typically, you'll see if you're not getting communication, you'll see the first L and the second L if you have a multi-tier system, and then you won't have anything on the D light. That typically means that you either don't have it physically connected, it's not making a connection, your EtherCAT driver is not installed properly. If you're using Windows 7, there could be an older, you need to do an update. The KB3033929 is actually one of the patches that are needed to go to SP1 on Windows 7 in order for that EtherCAT driver to be done. The reason why is because the old one that we have for Windows 7 is not signed, and with that update, it actually will allow you to install that unsigned driver. And then another big thing that we've been seeing a lot recently is semantic endpoint protection and McAfee total protection. These antivirus softwares are actually flagging us for some reason. So we have a script that we can usually send to your IT department and take care of that issue fairly easily. We just need to know if you have that installed on your PC or not, or if it's going to be an issue. But typically when we get a phone call or if we get an email or anything like this, we'll walk through the steps on how we're going to solve everything like that. Another big thing I see with the Kryptons is that usually it has to be on, if you can go into your Ethernet card settings and then set up the 100 full duplex. Typically that speed works very well with the Kryptons. And then other than that, usually you don't see too many issues with cabling.
Just saw a question coming in from Mike Powell specifically. Does the EtherCAT DAC filter driver included with the most recent version of DEWESoft software download, or does that need to be done separately? The EtherCAT DAC filter driver should always be included with every time that you go to install DEWESoft. But if for whatever reason, let's say that your computer is locked down by IT departments and it's only allowed to install DEWESoft itself, and it doesn't include any of the ancillary or auxiliary software or drivers or anything like that, it's definitely possible you need to manually download the EtherCAT DAC filter driver itself. That is something that is available on our website. If you go to DEWESoft.com/download, you'll find it under the drivers section. It's called EtherCAT DAC filter driver. And then it's just a fairly simple download. It just runs as an application. It'll do everything automatically for you. It'll say also which ports or which actual network devices you want this EtherCAT DAC filter driver installed. Typically, the only one that you want that actually installed on is a dedicated either RJ45 network Ethernet port on your computer itself, or maybe some USB to Ethernet adapters and stuff. It will try to automatically do it for even something like Ethernet Bluetooth drivers or Ethernet, Wi-Fi adapters. And you're not going to be hooking up a EtherCAT device to your Wi-Fi. That's not we don't support that, so that you can't do it like that. So you don't need to include that filter driver on that particular network device. The only ones you need are your dedicated Ethernet port on your actual PC itself. If you're getting something like a DEWESoft SBOX, this should all be included on that, so you don't need to worry about installing that EtherCAT driver on the actual DEWESoft PC itself, because it will come with that included and already tested before you actually get that. Additionally, one of the things that we recommend if you're installing a brand new copy of DEWESoft on a computer, we always recommend clicking on, once you download the installer package from the website, from our website, you can right-click on the actual installer package itself, and then do a Run as Administrator. That'll be the best way that we recommend to make sure that it installs everything properly, includes everything that is needed in terms of getting DEWESoft to run, as well as the rest of those auxiliary or ancillary parameters that actually go. So maybe that way you'll be able to not only run DEWESoft, but run all the additional drivers and software kind of implementations to get that up and running and has the best kind of experience as possible. So is anybody else having any kinds of problems hooking up their software, or hooking up a new kind of device, or getting things installed, or anything like that? You're welcome, Mike. Glad we could answer that question. Hopefully it'll help out other people as they're hooking those up as well. Not seeing anything else come in, so we'll go on to the next one specifically. Another real big one we see coming in fairly frequently is connecting DEWESoft IMU1 as well as IMU2 devices. These are IMU stands for Inertial Measurement Unit, and it's two different devices that can tell different types of gyroscopic movement and then GPS coordinates and location for any kind of test. But the licensing and actually getting them hooked up is a pretty common question that we get. So typically with the IMUs, they are unique in that they are some of the only DEWESoft devices that the license you need to have exists on the IMU, as well as connecting to your PC itself. So in this case, if you have 3 different IMUs and 3 different computers that you have, you can actually take the IMU or the DEWESoft license, the DWL license that you get when you have an IMU delivered. You can take that license and put it on 3 different, all 3 of those licenses on 3 different computers. Grab any of the IMUs you have, and it will only activate the IMU license per device that you plug in and per hardware connection. That way you don't necessarily have to say, oh, if I'm grabbing this computer, I have to grab this IMU off the shelf. Oh, someone already grabbed that one incorrectly, and you don't necessarily have all of them hooked up at any given time. This way it takes out as much as, or as few problems as possible. So specifically going through that, if you want to connect something like an IMU1, the IMU1 itself is powered specifically through USB. You don't have to have any kind of external power specifically to get that up and running. So the first thing you need to do is, once you start up X3, go to Options, Settings, and then go to the Licensing tab. In Licensing, you click on Create New License. Here's where you want to type in your typical DEWESoft DWL license code. It'll be DWL, and then have 4 characters, 4 characters, then 4 characters. So a total of 12 after that. Once you correctly type in that license and press Enter, it should be registered to the computer. It will go automatically to the section under non-active. Now, it will say non-active even if you have the IMU plugged in, even if it's the correct license for that machine. It will still say non-active. It will only go to the active section once you actually activate the IMU itself, and that correct IMU associated with that license is then activated. So to do that, it used to be, if you're running older versions of DEWESoft, even X3, maybe something like let's say SP7, DEWESoft X3 SP7 or older, you would go to the Extensions tab and then go to Add a New Extension, and then find the DS IMU plugin itself. That has since been moved to the Devices tab. So now you go to Devices, and there should be a round plus button specifically to add that in. And then you can go in there, scroll all the way to the bottom, and then it'll say DEWESoft plugins, and then you can find DEWESoft IMU. That's because with those, we like to see the extensions menu and adding different kinds of plugins, everything that is explicitly software-based, where you don't need to worry about additional hardware. So we like to keep that section dedicated to extensions, and then things like IMUs, or you're adding in additional hardware, we added that to the Devices tab. So once you go in and add that device, add the new plugin for DSIMU, we'll then bring up a new section of the software, and if your IMU is already plugged in and registered and recognized, it will see it and then activate the COM port, and then your license will then activate if you want to go check that, and everything would be good to go. If for whatever reason the COM port is not automatically assigned, you will get a red notification saying you are not registered to use the DSIMU plugin, even though you typed in your license. You are not registered to use it, and it will not let you continue on into DEWESoft and then actually go on and resume your data, or resume any kind of a channel setup or things like that. So what you need to do is click on the IMU tab itself, and you can see what particular information is about that device. If you're not getting this not registered error, usually what that means is while you activate the plugin itself, it has not actually even seen the IMU. It is seen on a Windows level, but it actually is not seen by DEWESoft itself. So if you're not sure necessarily what your COM port of that unit is, you can actually go to press the Windows key on your PC or your laptop, and then type in Windows Device Manager. That'll give you a rundown of all the devices that are actually connected to your PC at that time. What you want to go do is then go to COM ports or COM devices, and just expand that particular menu, and it'll tell you all the COM devices. There's a high probability that this is the only COM or serial device that you are using in this case. It will say T USB device, and then it will give you a COM port. In this case, it may say something like COM1, COM2, COM3. That is the actual DEWESoft IMU that you have connected. So then once you go back into DEWESoft X3, since at this point it will not automatically, or has not automatically recognized that IMU, you want to click on COM port and actually recognize, and it will give you a list of all the COM ports that you have on this computer. As we said, if you only have one, there will only be one option. If you have more than one, this is where we actually wanted to check and make sure what your IMU specifically is and how it's connected to your computer. So once you do that, there's a high probability that then it will connect, and that will be enough to get it recognized. Once it is recognized, the red error will go away, and it will come up with a lot of information about the device. So it'll give you a very long serial number for that particular IMU. It'll get you firmware information about the device. It'll get you the baud rate that it's communicating at, and other kinds of open source and licensing information specifically about that individual device. And then you're good to go. Another thing specifically about these IMUs is now when once you're done, you're actually collecting your data, and you want to move on. If you just save and quit, and then you close down the software, remove the IMU from the computer, and then the next time that you boot up DEWESoft again, it will then say you are unregistered for the IMU plugin. What would you like to do? This is most likely just meaning that the IMU plugin itself, you didn't remove it out of the Devices tab. So even though you're not actually using any kinds of IMU, and even though you have the license in, they will resume and try to automatically run the same plugin one more time. So you just need to go back to the Devices menu and remove that DSIMU plugin. If you're not using it, or you don't actually have it connected at that time, you can remove that from the actual extensions area itself. And then you'll be able to resume and get back up to your DEWESoft as normal. Now, with the IMU2, all those settings are still the same, but the biggest thing is that these specific IMU units, they are actually powered separately than the USB device or the USB port on the computer itself. So you typically need something like a SBOX to have power out, a Sirius with the 2-pin power out, or something like a DS power splitter that we offer. So you need to not only plug it into your computer through USB, but you need to have this dedicated power out port specifically. If you do not, you will plug in the DEWESoft IMU to your computer. It will still show up under that Windows Device Manager as an active COM port, but DEWESoft will not be able to communicate to that device, even if you already have. So it's enough power to recognize on a Windows or a PC level to see that this COM port is being used. This is the device that actually is being recognized by the PC at this time, but it does not have enough power to actually run and then open up in your DEWESoft. So if you have something like an IMU2, that is typically the most often problem that we have is that it is not specifically or explicitly powered by a separate device to get that up and running. So you need to have some sort of a dedicated device specifically to get that powered up and running as well. So does anyone have any additional questions about maybe hooking up a additional type of adapter or maybe another type of DEWESoft sensor that we have, or other type of device to get those up and running? So those are the most often questions that we get, were those kinds of devices. But anything you're thinking about? Okay, maybe not for those particular devices then, but we can absolutely move on. So specifically with a lot of the questions that we receive about these types of DEWESoft hardware and the devices, we also get asked about CAD files. Specifically, that way you'll be able to get the information if you need to install some DEWESoft devices in a particular location, or you need to find out the exact measurements, or even weight of those particular units. A lot of this information is available online. You can see I have some picture and drawings available. This is actually available on DEWESoft.com right now. If you go to DEWESoft.com, on the very top of bar on the left, you'll see a section called Products. And then as soon as you choose any particular product that you're looking for, be it a DEWE43, a Sirius, a rack-mounted unit like an R4 or R8, you can go and get some more information about those. And then there's a section on the website that says Tech Specs. Click on those tech specs. It'll actually take you to some more dedicated information like amplifiers, channel bandwidth, excitation limitations, and power and things like that. But on that same page will be this actual graph that you'll see. It will give you breakdowns and measurements of those particular units. If you require more information, as in dedicated CAD files for those, we do have a variety of IGS and step files available for download if you are interested in those. So you can actually get in contact, email Robert or myself at support.us@DEWESoft.com for information about that. We can get you the information for the specific device that you're looking for. We just saw a new question come in about if DEWESoft offers 3D mockups, I believe. Just disappear. We'll get a copy of that here really quick. If we offer, I think it was if we offer any dedicated mockups specifically. I don't believe that we have any 3D printed, let's say, concept versions of readily available as of this time, but if we need to print those out with a type of 3D printer, we might be able to get those ready by default or so. If customers, we know that customers actually like to get these kinds of CAD files, IGS or STEP, to print out their own, and then that way they can put together some sort of a mock-up or a dedicated space on their own. I've heard of that happening before. Let's see what will come in here. And not seeing that just yet, but we will definitely be able to get that question here momentarily. So we will get back to that here in just a moment. We'll move on to the next one. So another question that we get fairly often is the SBOX units that we have are it's possible to power them on remotely from a dedicated location instead of actually going up to it and physically pressing the on switch. The best way that we find to actually implement this, and necessarily if you're looking to automate a particular run, or you're going to be having an SBOX installed in a dedicated location, you want to have the ability to actually power that on, is to use the GPS display port on the back of the box itself. It has these 9 actual pins on it. They're used for if you're doing something like, let's say, RTK, GPS, IMU data. You might be able to, or you might be actually using this pin, so you won't be able to use this port if you're actually using that in a highly specified or highly specific application. But if you're not actually using anything like that, this is a way to make it a lot easier to get those powered on. So if you can see, here's what the actual pin on the SBOX looks like. It's on the SBOX E, SBOX WE, the waterproof units that we have. The only pins that you specifically need for this type of application are going to be pins 5 and 6. 5 is going to be your ground, and 6 is going to be the remote on pin. So what you need to do is with your voltage or any kind of remote power or a remote battery or any type of voltage signal that you have, if the SBOX has dedicated power already assigned to it, and then this particular pin has pins 5 and 6 wired up, if it gets a signal or a voltage from between 3 and 30 volts, it will actually automatically start the startup sequence. It will start Windows, and you can continue on and get back to everything you're looking for. That way you don't need to actually go up and turn the device on. You can have it just say I have a switch actually set up. Once I want to turn the device on, flip this particular switch at my local location, and it will automatically turn on after that. Now, if you want to turn off the device, what you need to do is either set that remote voltage to something like less than a half a volt, or just turn it off at that point. You can actually do that. It doesn't need to necessarily be turned off itself. But if the device or if the GPS power port receives less than half a volt for more than 1 second, that is what actually will begin powered out procedures. And interestingly enough, it will actually not just automatically cut power to the device. That actually sends a Windows shutdown message to the computer to begin a safe shutdown procedure. So it's not like you're actually just pulling power from the back of a unit itself. We know that you're not. No one says that you're supposed to actually just pull out power from a device. It's always recommended to go through the safe shutdown procedure. So removing that or sending that less than half a volt signal to this GPS port will actually begin that safe Windows shutdown procedure. So once you have all your data saved, it's a lot safer and a lot better for the computer to actually run that way. And something that I just know out of my personal experience when kind of testing this, as I can see, it's very important that if you only put in this 3 to 30 volt signal through pin 6 on this device, the remote on, it will not power on. You do need to have a ground signal actually going in through pin 5 to complete that actual circuit. If you don't have that, it will not recognize that, and you will probably have some difficulty getting the power on to run after that. Has anyone actually tried to power on an SBOX like this before? Have they run into success? Have they run into any kinds of issues getting those up and running before? And maybe we can get that taken care of then. All right, not seeing any additional questions coming in at this point. So we'll go on to the next one at this point. But those are some of the most frequently asked questions that we get periodically just over the last, let's say, few weeks or so for DEWESoft questions. Those are the kinds of things we get through the support.us email. So that's just kind of what we had really dedicated specifically to this kind of presentation. So absolutely, we'd like to, if you have any other questions that are unrelated to anything else that we may have seen on the screen at this point, you're more than welcome to ask those. If you decide to use your microphone, let's say we'll go through one at a time. Maybe if you wanted to submit a question via the chat, it'll go into our host location and won't actually be going directly to us. We are not seeing that at this point, but maybe if you put in and say, I have a question, we can actually go ahead and unmute you and you can ask that. And then either Robert or myself, or we have John, Matt, and Dave actually on the line as well. They'll be able to unmute themselves after that, and then we can actually go ahead and kind of get this discussion started. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free. We can go ahead and either submit them to that chat or open up your microphone. And if a lot of people actually ask for that microphone at the same time, it may be a bit more confusing. So let's try to find the best way to really implement this at this point. So if you have any questions, let's go ahead and see what we got. So it looks like we have one coming in here from the user that said A4V 97ZZ. I don't see who necessarily what their the name for that is. So let's see, Josh. I think we have a one question coming in. Keith Matson. Thank you, Keith. So that question is from Keith. What do we have from that John? Actually, let's see if we the best way to. Yeah, but if I'm doing that, then it'll make the window go away. So he's saying that he is not seeing our questions coming in through our host. So let's see how we can get this chat up and running. But in the meantime, Keith, I'm going to go ahead and actually unmute you. So let's pull this screen back up, and maybe you could ask that question one more time. Let's pull this up.
Just the wiring setup on a Dewey 43 for a potentiometer circuit.
All right, so if you're looking up a potentiometer on a Dewey 43, then I believe that we have a dedicated, if you pull up the technical reference manual for the Dewey 43, you know what, I think we may go off script a little bit here, and I'll actually pull up the DEWESoft website. So let's change, and forgive me if this is going to show up as a gray here. What we want to do is share my screen entirely. So what we're going to do is change and go over to my entire screen as opposed to just the PowerPoint. So what we'll do here is actually go up to DEWESoft and go to the Dewey 43 technical reference manual. So one of the things that I do a lot is I go to DEWESoft.com, as we're talking about the download page. We go to download, and we want to go to manuals and brochures. So we go here, go to hardware manuals. Let's scroll down, and what we're going to be looking for here is the Dewey 43A technical reference manual. And then a lot of great available and useful information here. Let's actually go down, look in the manual itself. So let's scroll down, and if you see here, we'll get to an area that says typical sensor connection. So for correct measurements, it's highly recommended to ground the 43. That comes with every Dewey 43, comes with the ground, its own ground cable. But if we see here, we can actually zoom in a couple different recommendations here. So first, sensor with differential output by the module, current measurement. Here's what we do. You'd have something like a resistor between your 4 to 20 milliamp device. But if we scroll down, right here, so we have potentiometer sensor connection. So if you hook up a potentiometer to a Dewey 43, here's the recommended wiring diagram for that. So this is going to be on the left side is going to be your Dewey 43. It looks like we have pins 1 and 6 are going to be jumped together. That's going to be your excitation plus and sense plus lines. Pins 3 and 8 are going to be sense minus and excitation minus. Those are going to be actually connected together. And then your input from your actual potentiometer, input plus, is going to pin 2. So what that means, you can actually see over on the right side of the picture here how that actually pulls that information in. So you want to have it actually going to be 3 different kind of poles, you could say, on the potentiometer. You have your positive and your negative excitation. That way you can actually pull in the power, and then the input with your actual potentiometer, you're going to physically move that device in and out. It's going to change necessarily how much electricity flows in for that particular device, and how that's going to correlate that electrical signal actually to DEWESoft itself. And we might actually be able to pull up DEWESoft, and you will actually see this potentiometer sensor connection actually in DEWESoft itself. So what we're going to do is actually bring that up, and you can see what that will look like. And what we will do is actually start simulating a Dewey 43. I do not have one connected here. can simulate that right now. Dewey 43. So here, what you would need to do is change this measurement type from voltage and maybe I can't do that because I am only simulating this particular device. But what you would do normally is go and change this from voltage to something like bridge, or not bridge. You want us to keep under a voltage specifically. But if maybe just because I am simulating that, that is the main difference. But they would look very similar to this. Here we go. We're doing this on a series at this point. But then we have the potentiometer specifically. Then it says the same kind of thing that we have, the same kind of wiring diagram you can see right here on the screen. Excitation plus and sense plus are going to be jumped together on one side. Excitation minus and excitation minus and sense minus are going to be connected to the other. And then input plus is going to be right in the middle of that particular device. Then you can set up your either your scaling information. We have 2-point scaling as well as by function scaling. The other can have scale or sensitivity. And then here we go. Another thing specifically with potentiometers, you can actually set up as displacement. So here we go. Now we can actually have that set up as millivolts per volt equals meters, or even saying that to, I don't think you necessarily need kilometers for a potentiometer, but you can set it to inches, millimeters, centimeters, probably a lot easier in terms of scaling at that point. That way you can say I have X number of millivolts per volt equals my centimeters, and then that'll be at your highest and lowest point on your potentiometer. If you don't already have that information already from your calibration or your calibration sheet, you might be able to even just pull it out to the farthest extent that you're looking for millivolts, and all the way at your smallest particular set for that particular device, and you can set up this calibration this way. So we had Dave actually say something about his particular way, what he thinks would say that particularly for a Dewey 43. So why don't you unmute yourself, Dave, and why don't you say what you were thinking about that to hook up a potentiometer to a Dewey 43?
I was only going to say that with the Dewey 43, you could just use that bridge option. You had the two options there, so you could use a bridge option.
All right, so we could do that and change that to the bridge option then. Yeah, it looks very similar. We have excitation plus and sense plus on the top, and input plus there. But then would you also say then to the excitation minus and sense minus? How would you best to hook that up?
I would set that up as a half bridge.
Half bridge.
43 is a little bit different because it doesn't have internal bridge completion like the series amplifiers. In this particular case, the way that the potentiometer works is you're basically making a loop, and as the slider goes across that resistor, you're changing the voltage output. So historically, I've always set them up as actually just go back to a differential voltage sensor. And then the 43 is a little bit different. It's not, so if you look at the diagram here, if you just click connector, your excitation is actually always providing positive 5 volts excitation, and excitation minus is providing negative 5 volts excitation. So you'll actually keep it in this configuration. But if you look at the 43 wire diagram or the potentiometer sensor connection that you had in the other in the PDF there, just like this is how you would actually wire it up as a differential voltage sensor. But then excitation plus is automatically 5 volts. Excitation minus is automatically negative 5 volts. So it's a 10-volt circuit. And then your in plus is where you're picking off the voltage from that wiper, and then you tie your in minus to ground.
Yeah, I was just looking at that as well. You can actually see the excitation plus and sense plus are actually connected here, just like in the other diagram. And excitation minus and sense minus are wired together in the same configuration. So for a potentiometer, all you would need after that is just to hook up to the input plus. So you don't actually need input minus at this point for that particular device, and that would probably be the best way to hook it up on a 43. Right.
Awesome. I did it right. Thank you, guys.
Perfect. That's exactly what we're looking for.
Awesome.
All right, so it looks like we have another question from Alfred, and it says iLight slices do not provide a dedicated ground terminal as provided in the Cirrus modules. For iLight, is there any reason the chassis that the rack version is mounted and it cannot be used as a ground? John, I know you know a lot more about the iLight chassis and whatnot, so I don't know if you want to try taking this one.
Yeah, generally standalone are going to have an individual ground port because you don't really know how they're, I'll say, configured, if they're isolated, if they're kind of just floating on a rubber mat or something like that. Whereas on a rack mount, generally speaking, that rack is grounded. So for the iLight rack, there's not a dedicated like ground mat plug, if you will. Whereas on the modular units, there are, just because we're kind of assuming that that rack is grounded as it should be, but there's no reason that you could not ground directly to the chassis of that iLight.
All right, great. Thank you very much, John. It'd be a great way to do that. So instead of what he was saying for a rack-mounted iLight, for example, you don't necessarily need to ground that per the device or per the individual slice, something like a Sirius slice, because for that particular installation, the actual rack system that you have would most likely be grounded. So that's the best way to kind of implement that. I think we had another question just come in about software. All right, sharing the screen. Let's go back to oops. Excuse me. I want to share that one. Okay. Just Alfred also asking after that, does DEWESoft guarantee general and or software support for a given amount of time in the future? In similar vein, are customers given an end of life notification so they can plan accordingly? Perfect. So yeah, DEWESoft at this point in time, we do guarantee all support for software kind of going forward for any particular devices. Obviously, at this point, we believe that X3 is the most up-to-date version of the software, and that's the one that we would definitely recommend the most. DEWESoft 7, which is the a much older version that's been around for a lot longer, just received its final updates, I believe, at the end of, or it received its final support notifications at the end of 2019, or maybe it was 2018, the beginning of 2019. So with DEWESoft 7, updates for those had actually been going on at least through the latter half of, let's say, 2015, 2016, final bug fixes and things like that. But those final, let's say, end of life notifications specifically for DEWESoft 7 were put out well in advance, saying at least a year before any type of support for development will actually be finishing up at that point. So at this point, we see that DEWESoft X3 is going to be the version going forward. It's very powerful, and it actually built on a lot of information from DEWESoft X2, which is definitely still available to download at this point as well. But for any time in the future, yeah, we will absolutely be working with software for DEWESoft X3. And in the event that let's say, a theoretical X4 were to come out, I don't know anything about that. But if that were, customers would definitely be given notification when DEWESoft X3 support would no longer be accepted. So even if an X4 version were to come out, we would still give support for X3 for a significant portion of time in the future. So even if you're still using X3, you'd be able to contact me or Robert, and we'd be able to help you out with that as much as possible. We still get questions about X2 coming in. So at this point, X2 is still definitely a viable solution that certain types of customers are using. We have not given any kind of end of life notification for that. We're still going through with that. So I just got another question about these slides, and these slides will absolutely be available. We have, I believe we have a notification or some kind of list of everyone who's registered and actually in this chat right now. So if anyone asks, you are more than welcome to get a copy of this presentation with a lot of the information. I believe we're also trying to record this as well. So if anyone has any questions, or maybe there was something that there was talking about that weren't necessarily or wasn't on the screen, that we were actually going over in the chat, that is something we can absolutely be able to get for you at a later time. All right. So
Comment on the end of life. I believe, I guess from what I gathered there, that the concern was end of life with specific hardware. I just wanted to make that very clear that all of the software moving forward to date has been backwards compatible with all of the devices ever created by DEWESoft. So I'll just throw that out there.
absolutely, that's a great point. We have some DEWESoft Sirius licenses that have been around since 2013 or 2014 or so, and those are absolutely still supported in DEWESoft X3, even though I don't believe even DEWESoft X at that point was or I think it was DEWESoft X, but not even X2 was a viable solution or something that was being worked on at that point in time. So absolutely, yeah, we still see devices come into our office for calibration that are fairly old like that. They still receive regular firmware updates. They still receive regular calibration information. They're still compatible with versions of the software going forward. So every time that we come out with a new version of software going forward, our plan is to make sure that any existing hardware on DEWESoft DAC, data acquisition equipment that you have, is going to be compatible with that going forward. So you can feel comfortable knowing that the hardware investment that you've made will still work as software continues to advance. You might be able to get some more advanced functionality and features that weren't excuse me, available out of the hardware that you already have that you weren't even thinking about when you purchased it, because the software has advanced at that point.
And was there any other questions? Anybody else need to?
I know that someone was asking about those slides. We actually will be able to post this presentation and some of those information on our social media as well. So if you're interested in finding out those, you can follow our Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook pages. They're going to be DEWESoft USA. I'm actually going to get a confirmation on the exact handle for those. But you can probably just go ahead and search for DEWESoft USA, and you'll be able to find a lot of those on your search engine of choice. There we go. At least it's going to be specifically for Twitter. It's going to be at DEWESoft USA, all one word. And then Facebook is going to be just search DEWESoft USA as well, and then look up on LinkedIn. It's going to be DEWESoft USA. So these slides and information will be available on those social media platforms as well. Right. Any more or other questions anyone else has at this point they'd like to talk about? Grab this here real quick. All right. Well, at this point, we don't see any additional information coming through the chat. So again, if you have any additional questions after this, please, you are more than welcome to submit an email to us at support.dewesoft.com. I will actually pull up that screen one more time. It's right here, support.us@dewesoft.com. That is the email that both Robert and I check every single day, multiple times a day, all the time, every day. So if you have any questions, we will do our best to get that information to you. And John and Dave and Matt, who are also on this call, we will be able to get any kind of information to you for anything that you need. So thank you for everyone who decided to show up here and hopefully learn some more information about DEWESoft and kind of the best implementation that we recommend at this point. So if you have any additional questions, please let us know. Please give us feedback on how you felt about this particular course. I'll actually go to the last slide there. Any additional feedback, how you thought about this particular course, anything that you're also interested in the future. I know that we obviously had our Sprain Gauge one last week, so if you have any other topics you'd like to talk about that, please let us know. Please let us know what you are interested in and what you would like to have maybe some more information about. If we already have that information available, we'll be able to get that to you on our website if it is, or if not, we might be able to build some more information about that. But we also will be having these some of these webinars throughout the future. If you have any additional questions, we'll be able to get those to you. We'll be able to be posting those on our social media page for the next type of information. If there are going to be any of these kinds of question and answer type things, if you have any more questions. So please follow us on social media to find out when the next presentation are going to be available. But otherwise, thank you so much for showing up, and hopefully you learned a lot, and we'll be able to talk to you again in the future.